Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, really valuable, I think, insights on avoiding cancer. And this comes from someone who's dedicated his entire life, pretty much, to understanding it.
Yeah.
We're diving into the advice of Professor Sun Yan. He's a remarkable 95-year-old member of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, with 60 years immersed in cancer research.
60 years. Wow.
I know, right? So our goal is simple. Pull out the practical takeaways, the actionable stuff, from his recommendations. This is based on an article reporting on his advice from CAFEF, which is a Vietnamese financial news outlet, interestingly.
Okay.
Think of this as, your direct line to some seriously experienced thinking on staying healthy.
Exactly. And we know you're here to get informed, but without getting totally overwhelmed by, tons of data. Professor Sun Yan's guidance, it might sound like common sense maybe on the surface, but it's backed by this incredibly long and distinguished career. So we're going to break down his 4 key areas of focus for cancer prevention and really sort of dig into the reasoning behind each one.
Okay, sounds good. Let's start with the obvious, maybe, what we put in our bodies. Food. Professor Sun Yan emphasizes avoiding oily and fried foods and also processed items.
Right.
He apparently lives by a rule of eating until he's only about 70% full, which that practice makes a lot of intuitive sense, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Portion control, essentially.
Exactly. And he specifically limits animal fat, red meat, and anything deep fried. And this isn't just a personal preference. There's a strong body of evidence linking these things to a higher risk of certain cancers, especially gastrointestinal cancers.
Yeah, and what's really compelling here is how his long-term observations, from decades of work, align so well with these big population studies.
Okay.
The article points to a pretty significant finding from the Chinese National Cancer Center. This is a lack of fruit and vegetable consumption is actually the leading preventable cause of cancer in China.
The leading cause. More than smoking.
Yeah, accounting for over 15% of major risk factors. That's a bigger impact, apparently, than even smoking or alcohol. And you might wonder, okay, why? Well, fruits and vegetables, they're just packed with compounds, antioxidants, fiber, all sorts of things that can protect cells from damage and help regulate processes that can go wrong in cancer development.
That really does make you rethink your dinner plate, doesn't it?
Totally.
And speaking of what we eat, the article also mentions the World Health Organization, the WHO. They classify processed meats, bacon, sausages, ham, that sort of stuff.
The tasty stuff.
Unfortunately, yeah. They classify it as a Group 1 carcinogen.
Group 1. That's the highest level, right?
Yeah.
Same category as tobacco smoke, asbestos.
Exactly. Pretty heavy hitters. And apparently, regular consumption of these things can increase your risk of colorectal cancer by around 18%.
18%. And it's worth understanding a bit more about why that is, the processing itself, curing, smoking, and also the high-heat cooking methods often used for red meat, like grilling or frying. These can lead to the formation of compounds, things like nitrosamines and heterocyclic amine, nasty stuff. They've been shown to damage DNA, the blueprint of our cells.
Right, which can lead to mutations.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Potentially leading to uncontrolled cell growth, which is cancer.
Yeah.
So Professor Sun Yan's recommendation to limit red meat and oily foods and really prioritize fruits and vegetables, it directly tackles these risks. It's a shift towards a diet that's richer in protective compounds and, lower in those things that promote damage.
Makes sense.
And also lines up with official guidelines like the Chinese National Nutrition Guidelines, which advise, I think, is 300 to 500 grams of vegetables and 200 to 350 grams of fresh fruit daily.
That's quite a bit, actually, when you think about it.
It is. It requires a conscious effort for most people.
All right. Okay, so next up on Professor Sun Yan's list of things to avoid. Smoking and alcohol. No big surprise there, maybe.
Yeah, pretty standard advice, but he feels really strongly about it.
He does. He feels so strongly about tobacco control that he actually compares it to regulating drunk driving.
That's a powerful analogy, isn't it?
It really is. It frames it as a public safety issue, not just a personal choice.
And he's apparently successfully helped many of his patients quit smoking, so he's seen firsthand, the potential for positive change.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the dangers of tobacco smoke, it's a real cocktail of harmful substances. The article mentions over 7,000 different chemicals identified in tobacco smoke.
7,000.
Yeah. And at least 69 of them are known carcinogens, things like nicotine, tar, nitrosamines. These chemicals can directly damage DNA in cells all over the body, increasing the likelihood of those cancerous mutations we mentioned.
And it's dose dependent, right? Like the more you smoke, the longer you smoke.
Exactly. There's a clear dose-response relationship. Longer duration, higher quantity equals greater harm. Simple as that, really. The scale of the problem, particularly in China where he works, is quite stark. The 2020 report highlighted in the article says about 1 million deaths occur there annually just due to smoking.
1 million people. That's a truly staggering figure. It surpasses the combined deaths from like HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, traffic accidents, and suicide combined.
Just puts it in perspective.
It really does. And then there's alcohol, often seen as maybe more socially acceptable, right? But it's also classified as a Group 1 carcinogen.
Same group again?
Same group. The evidence clearly links alcohol consumption to an increased risk of various cancers, mouth, throat, liver, stomach, breast cancer too.
Right.
Globally, the article points out, alcohol is linked to around 1 in 18 cancer cases. So yeah, Professor Sun Yan's firm stance against both smoking and alcohol, it's not just opinion. It's rooted firmly in a deep understanding of their direct cancer-causing effects.
Okay. Now, this next point is fascinating because it goes a bit beyond our direct lifestyle choices, like diet or smoking. Professor Sun Yan also emphasizes avoiding exposure to carcinogenic agents, and this includes certain infections.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's a reminder that cancer isn't always just about genetics or what we personally do, but sometimes about, things we might encounter in our environment.
Right. Things we can catch.
Exactly. And what's really striking is recognizing that a significant chunk of cancers worldwide actually have an infectious origin. The article cites a 2018 study in the Lancet Global Health, which estimated that around 2.2 million new cancer cases globally, that's about 13%, were linked to infections.
13%, that's huge.
It is huge. It highlights that prevention isn't just diet and smoking. It's also about being aware of and, trying to mitigate exposure to these specific infectious agents.
So the article details 4 key players here. First, HPV human papillomavirus. That's linked to over 90% of cervical cancer cases.
Over 90%, yeah.
And it's primarily transmitted through sexual contact or even just direct skin-to-skin contact.
Right. Then there's hepatitis B virus, or HBV, a major cause of liver cancer. It often progresses through stages like hepatitis, then cirrhosis, and then potentially cancer.
But how does that spread?
HBV spreads through blood, sexual contact, or from an infected mother to her child during birth.
Okay. What are the others?
The other 2 important ones mentioned are Epstein-Barr virus, EBV. That's associated with nasopharyngeal cancer in the upper part of the throat behind the nose. And it typically spreads through saliva.
Saliva. So
Yeah, think kissing, sharing drinks, maybe even sharing utensils sometimes.
Okay. And the last one?
Lastly, there's Helicobacter pylori, or HP. It's actually a bacteria, not a virus. This one dramatically increases the risk of stomach cancer by about 2 to 6 times, the article says.
Wow. And how do you get that?
Well, interestingly, HP can spread through oral contact, maybe contaminated food or water, or even through fecal contamination, which really highlights the importance of basic hygiene.
Like washing your hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hand washing after using the toilet,
Yeah.
not sharing utensils maybe if someone's known to have it, that kind of thing.
Professor Sun Yan makes a really important clarification here, doesn't he? He says that while cancer itself isn't contagious,
Right. You can't catch cancer from someone.
but these cancer-causing agents, the viruses and bacteria, are transmissible.
Yes. That's the key distinction.
So this really underscores the importance of, well, basic stuff. Good hygiene practices, making sure our food is properly cooked, drinking clean, boiled water, and also taking advantage of preventative measures like vaccines where they exist, like the HPV vaccine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all about minimizing our exposure to these underlying infectious triggers.
Mm-hmm.
It adds another crucial layer to think about for prevention, beyond just our personal habits.
Yeah, it really prompts us to think more broadly, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Okay, finally, Professor Sun Yan touches on something that might seem, less tangible, but it's clearly important to him: avoiding negative emotions.
Ah, the mind-body connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's quoted as saying, "Don't be angry, don't be stubborn, don't dwell on thoughts. Learn to live a little carefree." He even describes himself as carefree and says he's noticed that many of the cancer patients he's encountered over his long career shared tendencies towards stress, depression, and a generally melancholic outlook.
Well, what's fascinating here is the growing understanding scientifically of this intricate connection between our minds and our bodies. It's not just, pop psychology anymore.
Right.
Prolonged exposure to negative emotions can lead to chronic stress. And chronic stress triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol.
Okay.
Over time, if your cortisol levels are constantly high, it can actually suppress the immune system. This includes dampening the activity of important cells like natural killer cells.
Natural killer cells, they sound important.
They are. They play a role in identifying and eliminating rogue cells, including early cancer cells. So while negative emotions aren't a direct cause, like, say, a chemical carcinogen, persistent negative feelings, chronic stress, they can maybe create an internal environment that's just less effective at fighting off cellular damage or early cancers.
So it weakens your defenses, essentially.
That seems to be the idea, yeah. And it's not just about feeling generally stressed either. The article kind of hints at the particularly damaging effects of suppressed negative emotions. Things like holding on to anger, sadness, feeling wronged or resentful.
Right, not dealing with it.
Exactly. It suggests that holding on to these feelings can have tangible negative impacts on our physiology.
So if we consider this in the larger context of well-being, it really reinforces the idea that our emotional health is deeply intertwined with our physical health.
Absolutely. Cultivating a more positive or at least more resilient mindset might not directly attack cancer cells, but it could certainly contribute to a stronger, more balanced internal system overall. Makes sense, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's try and bring it all together. Professor Sunyan's 4 key recommendations for minimizing cancer risk are: first, be mindful of your diet. Limit the unhealthy fats, the fried stuff, processed foods. Eat more fruits and vegetables. Maybe don't eat till you're totally stuffed.
Right. The 70% rule.
Second, absolutely avoid smoking and minimize alcohol consumption. Pretty clear cut.
Very clear.
Third, take steps to avoid those carcinogenic infections we talked about through good hygiene, sanitation, and getting vaccinated when possible.
Be aware of those infectious agents.
And fourth, importantly, nurture your emotional well-being. Try to manage stress and avoid dwelling on those really negative emotions. Be a bit more carefree, as he puts it.
Yeah. These principles, they might seem straightforward on the surface, maybe even simple.
Yeah, things we've heard before, perhaps.
Perhaps. But they represent the accumulated wisdom of a 95-year-old expert who has literally witnessed the impact of cancer for 6 decades. It's a holistic perspective, isn't it?
Right.
It recognizes the complex interplay of our lifestyle, our environment, and even our inner emotional landscape and how this disease develops.
It's powerful stuff when you think about it coming from that depth of experience.
Definitely.
And on that note, maybe we can leave you with this thought. Reflecting on Professor Sunyan's insights, which of these 4 areas, diet, smoking alcohol, infections, or emotions, which one resonates most with you right now in terms of your own well-being?
Yeah, that's a good question to ponder.
And maybe what's just one small, concrete step you could potentially take today, inspired by his decades of experience towards a healthier future? It's a powerful reminder, really, of the connection between how we live day to day and our long-term health.